The latest operating system from Microsoft, Windows 11, is here. So let's talk about what you need to know, some cool features, business considerations, and what this is going to mean for computers going forward. Hey, what up? It's your boy MobbJustice back again with another video, and for today we will be looking at Microsoft's latest operating system, that is Windows 11. What is this all about? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? As always, this video is brought to you by the team over at Lion Media. Head on over to check out some of the crispiest photo, video, and audio content. That's www.lionmedia.com. Head on over, check it out, and just see what the team can do for you. If you follow technology, then you'll know that we're currently in a sort of software season. It's that time of the year where we hear from the big tech companies about their latest developments when it comes to their software platforms. Recently, we did a video about Apple's WWDC, where they showed off all their various platforms such as iOS as well as macOS, and then we've also had announcements that have come through from Google about their various platforms such as Android. So for today, we're looking at Microsoft, which makes the largest computer operating system in the world, that is Windows. They've had a number of different iterations, and now we have Windows 11. Now, the significance of Windows is the fact that, as I said, it is the biggest desktop operating system in the world, and we heard from their announcement that 1.3 billion users around the world are actually making use of this particular software. Yes, Apple is big, right? Yes, Google is big, but the dominant player in the market is still Windows. The other reason why this particular announcement is important is because Windows and Microsoft have to get this one right, because if you look at the history of Windows over time, you'll know that this is meant to be the iteration where it might be hit or miss, because the history of Windows over the last 2 decades, we had Windows XP, which was really good, followed by Windows Vista, which people did not like. That was a bit of a disaster. Then Windows 7 came along, and that was a really solid piece of software, followed by Windows 8, which did not do well, and now we have the current version, which is Windows 10, which across the tech community has been accepted as being a solid platform. So now, just given that history and that pattern, people would have expected that this would be the miss. So Microsoft really needs to get it right with this one. Overall, it seems like a good set of updates that Microsoft has made to Windows, and betas are already out in the wild. I'll actually link a couple of videos in the description of people that are already making use of the latest operating system, just to see what's actually going on that front. But from the announcement itself, and just by seeing what's going on, it really does seem as if Microsoft has borrowed some of the design cues and elements from the likes of Google's ChromeOS, and as well as macOS from Apple, especially with the rounded corners and all of the stuff that we saw coming along. The other big piece is that you see them talking about their ecosystem a lot, and the word ecosystem is something we've been exploring on this channel for a number of weeks now, especially with Samsung, Apple, etc. And Microsoft was really talking about how theirs is an open sort of ecosystem with the largest number of hardware manufacturers, because Windows is available across device manufacturers and machines. The other piece when it comes to this announcement was the issue of at the center. You'll see that Windows 11 uses a centralized taskbar. Usually that's been on the left, that's been at the traditional position, and we saw this issue of the center, coming out a number of times in the keynote. The user being at the center, the focus being on the center of the platform, whether you're talking on desktop and on tablets. That really seemed to have been a big theme for Microsoft this time around. As I said, this is a big step forward for Windows, and there was a lot to talk about, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. When it comes to highlight features, the first thing lots of rounded corners. This is what I meant when I said taking some design cues from the likes of macOS as well as ChromeOS. That was one of the big things that we saw. If you've been a Windows user over the decades, you know that there's been a lot of squared off edges, especially with the latest Windows 10. You see a lot of squares. When you compare that to what Windows 7 a couple of years ago was, that was sort of more rounded, but this time around they seem to have really emphasized that part. The other standout feature is this issue of continuity, right? And they actually highlighted in a number of different ways. So for example, if you're working on a document through syncing in Office 365, you can be working on a document on a phone, for example, and then continue on a tablet and then continue on a desktop. At the same time, if you're browsing, they also have that feature that's coming out on the Edge browser. And at the same time, they also highlighted a feature where if you have multiple displays that are connected to your setup, I actually have a couple of monitors myself, and the promise is that if you are connected to an external display, the moment you disconnect it, your app sort of snap into place, and then when you reconnect, they sort of pop back to where everything was before. Perhaps the biggest announcement of the day, and they sort of saved this to sort of the end of the presentation, is the fact that we're now going to be having Android app capability coming to Windows, and this is being done through Amazon. So basically through their app store, there'll be integration with the Amazon app store where you can actually download and actually run Android apps such as TikTok, Instagram, etc. And I really think that's a really cool feature, especially if you see what's happened with the latest set of MacBooks, and especially with the M1, where we're now allowing your iOS apps on Apple to actually work on macOS, right? Those phone apps actually working on desktop, seeing that same thing happening on the Windows side. The only gripe I have with that thing is it really seems like it's a cool feature and it hasn't been enabled yet in the betas. But my question is, why didn't they just work with Google on this feature? Why did they have to go through Amazon? Is there beef? Like, what's going on? It really does seem like something that would have been mutually beneficial. Outside of the big standout features that I've just mentioned, there were a couple of interesting things that I did note, and I'm just going to list a couple of them. First one is there's new widgets that are coming to Windows 11, and one of their feeds that they're touting, a news feed that they're touting, is something that I've seen on Windows 10. You sort of accidentally, press it sometimes in the bottom right, and it seems like they've really developed that concept to create this sort of news feed that they're using. The other piece is Microsoft Teams integration. I think over this lockdown period around the world, the likes of Zoom and Microsoft Teams have become really big communication tools, and Microsoft, recognizing this, has sort of built Microsoft Teams into their operating system. It no longer exists as a separate app that you have to download and all of that. And once again, you can't help but to make the comparisons with the likes of Apple that has FaceTime and iMessage integration into their operating system. But for me, the big issue is, okay, you've got Microsoft Teams, but what happens to Skype? Right? If you remember, about a decade ago, Skype was the big player in this space, and Microsoft actually owns Skype. And at this point, one wonders, is there really still a place for Skype in the Microsoft ecosystem? Because you have Skype for Business, and then you've also got Microsoft Teams. So are they going to get rid of Skype? Are they going to keep it? We don't know. On the tablet side, it really does seem as if they've done a bit of work to distinguish the tablet mode for a lot of the convertible sort of devices that are out there. When you switch to tablet mode, slight design cues that are changed, some space between icons, making touch points bigger, as well as stylus use, voice input when it comes to typing, that type of thing. Now, if we think about what happened with iPad OS recently, a lot of people in the tech community are not happy because from a productivity point of view, it really does seem as if that operating system is holding back the power of the iPad. So when you contrast that with what's going on the Windows side, as long as you have powerful enough internals, you really do seem to have a lot more flexibility if you were to take things on with a Windows based tablet. Though at the end of the day, the iPad still is the most dominant player in the market. From a productivity point of view, it does seem as if for now at least you can do more on the Windows side. The other piece is they actually promise that Windows updates, which come quite a lot if you're a Windows user, you often get that blue screen or that message that says there's new updates, that they're going to be actually 40% smaller, which means from an efficiency point of view, you use less data, less bandwidth, which is great. And then the other one is that they're gonna have a notification center. Once again, you can't help but to make these comparisons, and it reminds me more. I've been making a lot of macOS comparisons, but their notification center reminds me a lot of the one that you see on ChromeOS, which is inspired by Android. So sort of taking that phone sort of approach, and it really looks cool the way that they've got the quick toggles that are coming in on that end. Now, one of the big things when it comes to Microsoft is the emphasis on gaming. I've said it a couple of times on this channel that I'm not a gamer, but there's certain features that will come along that I find interesting. And this time around, they said that they're going to be taking some technology from Xbox that they're calling Auto HDR, which recalibrates colors, etc., for a better gaming visual experience. And one of the things that I was a bit amused by was the side-by-side comparison that they showed between the SDR and the Auto HDR. And in my head, I was saying, once upon a time, they probably touted that same SDR picture as being the latest and greatest. But now when you look at it, they make it seem as if it's this dull, old, antiquated thing. And probably, a couple of years into the future, one day they're going to be looking at that same Auto HDR feature and actually talking about how out of date that thing is. The issue of gaming actually helps us to move on to sort of the next stage, which is business considerations. And there's two that I wanted to highlight. The first one is around gaming, because Microsoft has its own sort of cloud gaming platform that it has, through the Xbox, and that really seems to be a trend that we are seeing across the big tech companies. When you think about what's going on with Apple's Arcade, as well as Google Stadia, and then at the same time, the traditional players in the console space, Xbox and PlayStation, they also have similar services. So Microsoft beefing up that, and it's really sort of showing that is a trend that's going to be big. And they were actually talking about the fact that they're going to be able to load certain elements of games faster and utilize graphics cards a little bit better from that point of view. The other piece when it comes to a business point of view is a redesign that comes in Windows 11 of their App Store. Now, when it comes to app stores, I find it quite ironic that Microsoft has shifted to that business model, because if you think about it, Microsoft sort of pioneered this issue of having a separate disk, floppy, whatever it was back in the day, where you could get software from somewhere else and just come and load it onto your computer. And it was Apple that actually pioneered this issue of having a centralized app store from which you can download apps onto your computer. Now, what I found most interesting was the fact that they actually took a swipe at Apple. You'll remember we've done videos in the past about some allegations around Apple's use of the App Store monopolistic tendencies, using the dominant market power, their fight with the likes of Epic Games, them taking 30% in terms of fees from app developers. And we heard Microsoft actually saying that they were inviting developers to develop more apps for their platform, and that if they use their own e-commerce engines, then they would take no fees. And that was a direct swipe, as far as I was concerned, at what Apple Apple's been doing with the fees on their own platform.
And whether you use the commerce engine that we help you with, and you want industry-leading rev share from that, or bring your own commerce engine. And if you do bring your own commerce engine, you keep 100% of your revenue. We keep 0.
In conclusion, it looks like Windows 11, at least for now, is looking like a solid update to the Windows platform. One will obviously have to wait to get the final versions into people's hands to actually make a final judgment. But for now, based on what Microsoft showed off, as well as the betas that are now in the wild, it's looking like it's a solid platform, to continue the legacy that is Windows. But for me, my biggest gripe is the fact that they have moved that start menu / taskbar into the center of the platform. I think when I update, whenever that is, I'm probably just going to keep it on the center, because I am a Mac user and a Windows user, and I've had Windows for a number of years, especially Windows 7. And, for me, it must sit on the left. So I think I'm going to be sticking to that traditional, that traditional way of doing things. But in terms of updating, I think I'm personally going to take a little bit of time to actually make that update. As I said, I use various platforms, and I'm actually not even running the latest version of things like macOS, for example. And a lot of it has to do with considerations around software that I use. Most of the time, you upgrade to the latest and greatest on the platform, but the app developers haven't taken time to actually update yet. There's usually that little bit of a lag. So usually I like to give a little bit of allowance before actually updating to the latest platform. And I anticipate that's what's going to happen. Windows 10 is really great at the moment, and I've been, thoroughly happy with using it. So I can take a little bit of time to upgrade to the latest one, but it's looking like it's going to be a solid one. Looking forward to getting that Windows 11 into my hands and actually playing around with it when the final version does come out. So that's been it for this video. Thank you to everyone who's been watching. You can let us know, are you excited by the update? Are you keen? Are you a Windows user, Mac user? Does this latest set of updates make you want to leave Windows? Does it make you want to come onto Windows? Tell us what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
Hey, this is Baby G, and you're watching the MobbJustice channel. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Live it, love it, like it. This is the MobbJustice TV.